All right, I'm going to kick things off here. So again, welcome to the Marine Trades Area Cleanup and Redevelopment Project Open House. Thank you all so much for being here, for taking time out of a Wednesday evening to share your thoughts and be here with us. I just wanted everybody to know, just because there are quite a few people on the call, we've muted everyone upon entry, and that's just to minimize background noise. So thanks for doing that for us. Thanks so much for some folks getting yourselves introduced in the chat. I see some local residents and some folks directly involved with the project. So it's great to see everybody, and feel free to keep those introductions going while I just get us set up with some logistics. I am going to introduce myself first and kick off some of the project team introductions. As I said in the chat, I'm Melanie Del Rosario. I work with Veda Environmental, and I will be your facilitator today. Veda is part of a larger consultant team led by Anchor QEA, and we are working with the Port of Bellingham on the community engagement and outreach for this project. I'll be leading us through the open house tonight with the help of my co-facilitator, Hillary Wilkinson, and I'll pass the baton off to her to introduce herself now.
Thanks, Melanie. I'm Hillary Wilkinson. I work with Melanie at Veda Environmental. I'm happy to be here co-facilitating tonight. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to our Port staff, Port of Bellingham staff, who will introduce themselves, starting with Brian Gowron.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary. Brian Gowron, Director of Environmental and Planning Services for the Port of Bellingham. And I just wanted to take a second to thank everybody again for taking the time out of your schedule to join us. It's a busy schedule, and we had hoped to do this when we started planning this. We had hoped to do this in person. We were really looking forward to having an in-person open house, but clearly that couldn't happen. So we fell back to Zoom. Still think this is a good opportunity for us to have some face-to-face discussions. It's not in 3D, but I think we're all used to Zoom now, unfortunately. So we'll carry on. So thanks for taking the time. We're gonna go through the presenters of our team and introduce ourselves. But before doing that, I just want to also acknowledge that we're gonna also have some folks from our other project partners, like the City of Bellingham, the Department of Natural Resources, the Working Waterfront Coalition, others that are a part of our broader team that will also be available potentially for some of the Q&A sessions at the end. So, but with that, we'll introduce the rest of our port team, and I'll pass it on to another Brian.
Hi, everyone. Brian Keenan, Port of Bellingham project engineer. Good to see you all here tonight. And with that, pass it off to Greg Mchenry.
Hello, everyone. Greg Mchenry, Senior Planning Analyst for the Port of Bellingham. And Kurt, you're up next.
Good evening, everybody. Kurt Baumgarten, Port of Bellingham Environmental Planner. And I guess back to you, Melanie.
Yes, thank you, Kurt. What I'd like to do now is just briefly walk us through the agenda. You all should have received an agenda from me via email, but I just want to quickly let everybody know what to expect tonight. So the first thing that we'll do in just a few minutes is share a video that we put together that gives a virtual tour of the project site and an overview of the site and the project area. We just put the finishing touches on this, so we're really excited to share it all with you. After the video, we're going to go into a presentation from the port staff that'll go into the goals of the project in a bit more detail, talk about the history, how we got to where we are now, and a little bit about what the next steps are, what the plans are for the future. After that, we're going to take a quick break. And then finally, we'll get to the facilitated Q&A, the panel part of the evening. And we anticipate that we'll probably have more questions. We may have more questions than we're able to get to tonight, but we just wanted to let everybody know that we plan on following up with everybody who submits a question. So please do send questions. We're inviting people to send questions via the chat for the panel. With that being said, as you're watching, hearing the presentation and thinking of things that you might want to bring up during the panel, you might want to have a pen, a pad of paper, a note or something on your computer so that you can jot those down. And then beginning of the break, we'll invite you to submit those via the chat and we will queue them up for our panelists. So do jot down all those great questions and submit them via the chat, and we will get to them. Briefly, if you have any tech issues tonight, go ahead and use the chat and let us know, and we'll do our best to address them. But as Brian said, I think we are getting a little familiar with this virtual space, so hopefully it runs smoothly. And then, as I mentioned when folks got on, we are recording this, and so if you have any kind of emergency or anything and you have to step away, everyone will get a link to this recording, and so you'll be able to catch up on anything that you may have missed. And so don't worry too much about that. I think that's all for logistics. Hillary, am I missing anything?
Nope, I think you got everything, Melanie.
All right, great. So with that, Hillary is actually going to pull up that video that I mentioned, and just bear with us. There's a few extra steps to make sure that everything goes through. The sound should come through on your end, so just make sure that you can stay muted, but make sure that your volume is up and that you can hear everything okay. And also, as I mentioned, we'll be, I may not have mentioned, we'll be sending the link to this video out to everyone at the end of tonight's open house, so you can watch it again and share it on with friends.
Welcome to this virtual tour of the marine trades area along the waterfront of downtown Bellingham, Washington. This area is the focus of an exciting project currently underway, the Marine Trades Area Cleanup and Redevelopment Project, that will expand and grow Bellingham's critical marine trades industry, address environmental cleanup, build critical habitat for salmon and other species, and improve public access for Bellingham residents and visitors. The Marine Trades Area is adjacent to Waypoint Park. It is also next to the Old Georgia Pacific site, the source of the original contamination.
So this project provides a really excellent opportunity, a really unique situation. These kinds of opportunities don't come along every day, where we have the opportunity to achieve cleanup, redevelopment, and expansion of marine trades is something the port really supports. It's really almost a generational type of project. This is the kind of thing that's going to have transformation effects throughout the community. So this project is located in the marine trades area of the Waterfront District. So there's four main goals with this. Primarily is, from the port's perspective, is to encourage the expansion and growth of the marine trades industries in the Waterfront District, as well as environmental cleanup through the MODCA cleanup process, improving habitat components, especially for salmon and marine habitat, as well as encouraging and supporting public access to the water.
Now we'll take a closer look at the four integrated goals, beginning with the expansion of the marine trade sector. The chance to expand opportunities for marine trades stems from the plan to redevelop the Aerated Stabilization Basin, or ASB, which is a remnant from the Georgia Pacific site. It will create acres of both new marine habitat and upland area, both of which will support a variety of marine trades use opportunities.
So the port's role in the Marine Trades Area Cleanup and Redevelopment Project really has multiple parts. One of the main things we obviously want to encourage is the expansion of marine trades and the marine trades industry. We also are party to the environmental cleanup projects with our project partners at the city and the Department of Ecology and Department of Natural Resources. And really the port has a long history of supporting marine trades, not only in our operations, like we're running multiple marinas, the Bellingham Shipping Terminal and the Bellingham Cruise Terminal, but our role with our tenants, who have a variety of different uses, everything from small boat builders to boat manufacturing, seafood processing, really has a strong history of supporting the marine trades. That's a big part of what we want to see come out of this project.
Here at Shop 38, we focus mainly on marine machinery, diesel engines, hydraulics, new vessel builds, mainly commercial, some recreational. The marine trades are important, and all really trades are important to an economy, to a local economy, because they offer high-paying jobs. Bellingham's always been a boat building area, shipbuilding, and we've got a history of it here, and we need to keep supporting that.
Yeah, so currently we're working on the second phase of cleanup, the final phase of cleanup for the Squalacam Waterway site. We've been working on the site since 2008. There's been a lot of work done here. The first phase of cleanup really focused on the central waterfront shoreline over to my left, So the second and final phase of cleanup, which we're working on right now, it will focus further up the waterway and out into Bellingham Bay. More work around the Bellingham shipping terminal, behind the former GP dock, back behind me. It's quite larger in scale and scope and complexity from the first phase. At the Bellingham shipping terminal, we're looking at different cleanup approach alternatives, really to as efficiently and completely remove the contaminated sediments in and around that facility. Current plan under the ordered cleanup is to clean out the aerated stabilization basin. That's this former treatment lagoon off to my right. Essentially, that'll be cleaning out all the legacy contaminants, the soft sediments. It'll essentially be a large excavated pit, and that's intended to receive all and consolidate and receive all the contaminated sediments from the waterway, from the bay, from the rest of the cleanup work here on the Whatcom Waterway site. What we're really excited about is we're working on a potential revision to that plan, which is we'll still construct a confined disposal facility, but instead of it being a shallow fill, roughly 30-acre confined disposal facility, it would be roughly 15 acres, give or take, of upland marine trades use viability, and roughly 15 acres, give or take, of new marine waters, so returning a portion of this facility back to the marine environment.
So Ecology's role is to provide regulatory oversight. We help make sure that these cleanups are protective of human health and the environment now and into the future. So we hope that we ensure that these cleanups comply with our Washington state regulations. First of which is the Model Toxics Control Act, or MOTCA for short, and as well as the Sediment Management Standards, or SMS. MOTCA started as a public initiative back in 1989 when it was voted into law, and public participation is required in MOTCA. So really my role with Ecology is helping us fulfill that commitment that we made to the public 30 years ago.
Reconfiguring the ASB also provides a unique opportunity to address much-needed habitat improvements for juvenile salmon. The port's plan would create approximately 15 acres of new marine and riparian habitats beneficial to juvenile salmon. The new intertidal and shallow subtidal areas along the interior of the ASB berm will be designed and preserved as habitat benches specifically tailored to the needs of young migrating fish. These habitat benches will connect to an existing eelgrass meadow located adjacent to the north side of the ASB. Together, these actions will establish a protective salmon migration corridor for young fish on their journey to the open ocean to optimize their health and survival for future generations. A fourth related goal of the project is improving public access. This project will support future improvements to shoreline access through new infrastructure and naturalized sloping shorelines. Future work in the project area completed by the port's partners will allow for increased recreational activities that may include kayaking, boating, and fishing. The port and city are also working together to retain and enhance the existing publicly accessible walking trail on the ASB berm.
It's really exciting to think about once the cleanup projects are done and the areas will be redeveloped, and that will really spur economic development for the community, the marine trades use areas, more public access to the shoreline and the waterway. It's an exciting time.
Community engagement is also a very important component of this project. During the past year, the port has been in close communication with the city, port tenants, and waterfront stakeholders to better understand and document marine trades land uses and business opportunities to ensure that economic trends and realities are reflected in the port's plans for the area. This deep engagement, especially with the marine trades industry, has helped shape the port's redevelopment approach in the marine trades area. To stay up to date, please visit the project website. It is updated regularly with current and planned activities, and opportunities for input are also posted there.
All right, excellent. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that bird's eye view of the project and that overview. While we pivot over to the presentation, I wanted to let everybody know that we will have some time for clarifying questions that came from either watching that video or from the presentation, the PowerPoint that you're about to see. So if you know, again, jot down anything, any kind of points of confusion or something that you want clarified on any of the slides that you're about to see. And we'll have a few minutes at the end of the PowerPoint to address those before we go on break. So just give us a few minutes. We'll get the PowerPoint pulled up. Looks great. I'm going to hand the baton over to Brian Gowron.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Melanie. Yeah, that was a really fun video to shoot, and thanks for watching that for everybody. And some of the information we're going to be going over this in the presentation is covers that as well. It may be a little bit repetitive, but we also will have the opportunity then to go in a little more detail, kind of different perspective on the things that we couldn't necessarily get into the video as well. So yeah, so next slide. So this is just kind of the agenda of what we'll be going through on the presentation here today. Just a little bit of project background. Clearly, this project, the Whatcom Waterway Bellingham Bay cleanups in general, have a long history, a lot of background information. So we're not going to delve into that, but we do want to have enough kind of information to set the table, kind of provide some context about what we're going to talk about tonight. And then the majority of the discussion is really going to be on those 4 project goals that we highlighted in the video. That's where individuals from the team here will cover those different project goals. We'll have a snapshot of the timeline, and as you'll see in that, it's also kind of it's intended to highlight that it is a complicated and interwoven project with other things that are going on, multiple steps that we want to highlight that there's a proposed schedule that we hope to hit, but there's lots of different moving parts that we just want to highlight in there. Then, like Melanie said, we'll have some opportunity for some clarifying questions. Then I understand we'll take a break and come back for more detailed Q&A following the break. So that's what we're thinking about going over. Next slide. Oh, I think maybe back up one. Yeah, there you go. Thanks. So this is a a very concise summary of recent activities on the Whatcom Waterway cleanup project. Going well back before 2007, back to the early mid 90s, actually the port and the Department of Ecology partnered on the Bellingham Bay demonstration pilot, which actually kind of kick-started a lot of the cleanup work in Bellingham Bay, which was a unique way of we actually brought together 14 different state, local, federal, tribal agencies to look at a bay-wide perspective on how to do cleanup, habitat, redevelopment comprehensively, so that we weren't just working in a vacuum on a project-by-project basis. Got a lot of the permitting agencies involved so that there was early communication about projects, and we were able to share information so there was no surprises or not getting up to speed on a project really when it hits their desk. So a lot of early communication, and that was really successful from the early days, and it continues today. We've morphed it a little bit now. It's called the Bellingham Bay Action Team, but we still get together regularly. We've talked to this project for a while with that team. So just really keeping the community, the project community engaged on it as well. So it's been really successful. So a lot of work has been building up to this point. And then even before this timeline starts too, of course, in 2005, the port acquired about 140 acres of property from Georgia Pacific when they were closing up shop, and we took on the responsibility of doing the environmental cleanup work on these projects. So that's really where this project gets started, is in 2007. The port, city, DNR, and the Department of Ecology signed a consent decree agreeing to implement the cleanup action that ecology had selected. And so that started the actual cleanup work on the Whatcom Waterway. As we were going through the design work on that, there was some changes in regulations. Some other things came up that we decided to break the project up into a couple of phases. And so we amended that consent decree and split the project up into 2 phases. Moved forward on phase 1 through the engineering, design, and permitting, which took a while, and then completed the construction of phase 1, which we'll have some slides in the next portion of this that kind of shows what some of the work that was done. But at the time, it really was the largest project the port had taken on, a $35 million environmental cleanup project. Really great success story. It built, set the stage for the Waypoint Park Beach, for example. That wouldn't have been able to be accomplished without first doing the Waterfront Waterway Phase 1. Also, then on the other side of the waterway, some marine infrastructure to facilitate the use of the marine trades area with the C Street barge terminal and that sort of thing. So really great project, got a lot accomplished, but it was only the first phase. And now we've, since that point, have started leaning into the design evaluation and some other pieces of working towards Phase 2, which is what we'll be talking about the rest of tonight here. So next slide. So, along with the cleanup, the land use is a really critical piece of the puzzle when you're working on these projects, because the Department of Ecology doesn't say you have to do a specific cleanup regardless of what your land use is. It's actually the opposite. They say, you tell us what your land use is, and we'll ensure that our cleanup decision works with your land use and it informs their cleanup decisions. So, at the time for this, looking forward into Phase 2, which included the ASB, which we saw in the video, was, back in 2007, the planned land use for that was to convert that entire basin to a marina. And so that was what we were moving forward on, but we kind of were focused on Phase 1. Once we started looking at Phase 2, we really got there was a new set of commissioners in place. There's new information available, and the commission directed us as staff to look at, are there other uses that we may want to consider that may be a change, that maybe facilitates a different type of cleanup and that sort of thing. So one of the first things we did was we commissioned a state of the boating industry update. Things had changed since 2007. And we got a good report from industry experts that basically said, yeah, the boating industry has changed since the original assumption of a large marina in the ASB. And ownership models have changed. The types of vessels that people utilize have changed a little bit, and that informed us enough. And also, they highlighted the fact that we have 2 existing marinas that require a significant amount of maintenance and some upgrades that could increase capacity in or change configurations in those before building an entirely new marina. So with that information, I think staff felt comfortable of saying, hey, I think we could start to evaluate some ideas for other uses within the ASB. And we'll go through this in a little more detail in a few future slides here. But we put our heads together, reported back to the commission. They continued to support looking at different alternatives. We did a kind of engineering evaluation. If the cleanup was to be adjusted, would that impact our ability to have more flexible land use opportunities? And then we reported that back to the commission, did some stakeholder input from the marine trades industries, and then have continued to work on some more investigation work just to make sure that we are fully informed as we move forward. So that's kind of a stepwise. Really just wanted to highlight that a lot of work has been going on in the background on this since before even Phase 1, but really once that work was completed, we've been really working on advancing this project over the past few years. So I think that's my last slide until we get back to some of the other land use stuff, and I think I'll pass this on to Brian Keenan.
All right, so starting off with the project goals. First and foremost, the environmental cleanup of the project area, and that's the project area as we'll show in the next slide. It's really the Waterfront Waterway. It's also the Central Waterfront and INJ waterway sites. It's a rather large area. Each of these 3 cleanup sites are really separate, independent of one another, but they're as you can see, they're all near one another, and as Brian described earlier, everything's kind of interwoven. So it's an interesting project area to be working in, and we're really excited to be moving this work forward. So maybe just really quick to point out here, just for location, the ASB, or the Aeration Stabilization Basin, is in blue. To the right of that is generally the marine trades area. Above that is the INJ waterway. Now, below that is, so between the ASB and the former mill site, that's the Whatcom waterway. And we'll discuss a little bit in greater detail. There's the inner Whatcom waterway, the outer Whatcom waterway. And then for those of you that are familiar with some of the port's facilities, there's the Billingham shipping terminal, the GP wharf or the GP dock, and then the downtown waterfront district area. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to maybe recap and explain just in just a little bit more detail, the phase 1 cleanup that was completed in 2016, and I'm referring to the first phase of cleanup for the Whatcom waterway site. It really focused on the inner waterway, an area referred to as the log pond area. The log pond was where the former pulp and tissue mill received rafted timber and use that raw material as part of their pulp and tissue production. Then further to the left, on the left side of this figure, is the Bellingham shipping terminal. And these different colored areas, they may be difficult to read here, but really the point we're trying to convey here is just give you some context if you're not that familiar with the project. The different colored areas are those areas worked and completed in the earlier first phase of cleanup. Next slide, please. So I think we've got a couple of photos here taken during the first phase of cleanup. We've got a photo here of the inner waterway northerly shoreline of the really inner Whatcom waterway. And what you're looking at here is the installation of a containment sheet pile bulkhead that, if you're familiar with the C Street terminal, that's really allowed two purposes. One, to kind of contain the upland areas, and those upland areas will be managed as part of the central waterfront site, and cut off the contamination to the Whatcom waterway, and also supports some of the marine trades industry at that area. Next slide, please. Another photo here during construction of the first phase of cleanup, where you see the barge and the dredge derrick here. That's positioned in the log pond area that I described earlier. In the foreground, you see the Bellingham shipping terminal. Further in the background, you see the GP dock or the GP wharf. Towards the upper left is the ASB, and upper right is the former pulp and tissue mill. And there's just a couple of brief summary of the work completed under the cleanup. So removed a lot of creosote treated structures, removal of contaminated soils and debris along the shoreline in the marine waters, and also habitat improvements. Next slide, please. So that's really a really brief recap of what was completed under the first phase of cleanup for the Whatcom waterway site. This slide, this figure here, shows in the lighter blue colored areas, those areas remaining to be cleaned up under the final or second phase of cleanup. And that's really the aeration stabilization, or the ASB, and around the shoulder or the corner of the ASB, portions of the inner waterway, in and around the GP wharf, and adjacent to and nearby the Bellingham shipping terminal, and further out towards the outer waterway. Okay, next slide, please. this figure here is really to try to illustrate what we were describing in the video. The graphic on the left describes what the current required cleanup, the goal of that required cleanup, which was really, or is rather, to construct that really shallow, large area confined disposal facility. And the plan, as Brian was mentioning just a little bit ago, was to construct a marina above that shallow confined disposal facility. So the concept is that we, before breaching the ASB berm, we dig out the ASB, manage those sediments, and then it's now a disposal or receiving facility for all the different contaminated sediments in the inner waterway, outer waterway, around the different facilities around the ASB here. Then that, in concept, that those contaminated sediments would be capped with a robust aggregate and rock layer, and then the marina would be built above it. So the recommended approach, or the approach that we're pursuing, is really, it's still a confined disposal facility, but rather than being a very shallow, large area CDF that sits below a marina, it's adjacent to the existing uplands, roughly 15 acres with a finished elevation of about 24 feet. Now we're still refining the area and target elevations, but it's very similar that to the current approach, where those impacted or contaminated sediments are confined within this facility, and you have a clean cap constructed above that. Then in concept, you have a clean barrier between that CDF. And then under this approach, we're looking to return about 15 acres of this former treatment lagoon back to the marine environment. That's something we're really excited about. Next slide, please. So here's a conceptual view of what the completed CDF, or confined disposal facility, could look like. It's you can see in this rendering really what a difference opening the facility back to the marine environment could mean. So it's, for me, what's exciting about this concept is that rather than having a confined disposal facility under marine waters, right? This is a clean marine basin that would support some habitat enhancements, also help facilitate and grow the marine trades industries. And we believe that this is a really good approach to really achieve all the different goals that we're talking about this evening. Next slide, please. See, with that, I'll hand it back off to Brian Gowan.
All right, thanks, Brian Keenan. So this is where we'll talk a little bit about one of the other project goals, which is the expansion and growth of the marine trades, and kind of going back to what I was talking about before, how land use really is a big piece of informing ecology's decisions on the cleanup alternatives and approaches to make sure that they work well together. So if you want to go to the next slide. So when we were starting to think about this, back to what I was talking about before, when port staff started saying, okay, what are the things that we could do here if the entire ASB was not going to be a marina? And so first and foremost, we wanted to make clear that, this is not an area that was slated for condos or for, a high-end luxury mixed-use area. And that's for a couple reasons. One, that doesn't fit with what the port's goal of this area was, but also it's already the existing marine trades area, even in the port and city adopted sub area plan for the waterfront district. This area is dedicated as part of the marine trades area. And I'll just read this to you because this comes straight out of the sub-area plan. And this is kind of fits with what we're planning for the land use. So this area is characterized by a working waterfront that will support a new clean ocean marina or other water dependent uses which adaptively reuse the ASB wastewater treatment lagoon. The main focus of development in this area is to accommodate jobs revolving around marine trades such as fishing, boat building, boat repair, marine haul out facilities, marine product manufacturing and supplies, and research and development. So, that's the lens that we started with, and that's the lens that we are continuing to promote as we look at evaluating what a variety of different land use options are. And we'll see kind of as we talk through this. I do want to just make sure it's clear. We don't have a specific decision on that, on the specificity of what exactly could go down here, but it is intended that these are under the lens of the marine trades that fits into what's already established and approved through the sub-area plan, which went through not only the city and port commission and city council, but a robust public engagement process for years and years. And this has been consistently what we've been looking at for this area. So the next slide. And so as we were going through this, what we did is I kind of mentioned that we had a staff brainstorming session. So first we started with to say, okay, if this was going to fit within that context of the previous slide of the marine trades area, what are and it doesn't have to be an entire basin of a marina. What are the other options that we could do down here? And then what also is needed to support those different types of uses. So for example, could we do a smaller marina? Oh, yes. Could we do, boat building, or could we do fish processing, a relocation of the commercial marine, the commercial fishing fleet into this area, and then expanding Squalacam Harbor area where they currently are? Are there a variety of different things that we could do in this area? And we really became pretty clear pretty quickly. There's a wide variety of things that we could utilize this space for, especially if we had adjacent upland that would support those activities. So we then went from a port staff level of kind of brainstorming and engaged the marine trades industries experts specifically. So if you want to go to the next slide, back, it's crazy to think, but it's about a year ago, we had a session very similar to this, but focused on about 20 participants from the marine trades, local industries, owners, operators, employees, Bellingham Technical College, the aquaculture folks from the hatchery, and really had some breakout sessions to try to help answer those questions of what facilities would be helpful. What kind of depths would you need? I saw a chat just came up asking about that. What kind of depths would you need to operate in those types of facilities? Would this be something that would be helpful to have in our local economy? Could you grow into these areas? Are there other tenants that may come from the outside and relocate to Bellingham to occupy this area? And really got really great feedback that not only was this something that had strong support from these from this industry, but also if you want to go to the next slide, not just highlighted just focusing only on the marine trades industry, but recognizing that a variety of different uses that are compatible, like public access and hand carry launches, opportunities to partner with the technical college or the community college, or the hatchery and aquaculture. So really some great stuff came out of that feedback from the marine trades workshop. And we've continued then to just advance this through the port staff and the port commission, getting a little bit more detail on what on some engineering, how could we do this, making sure we're checking that this is something that is constructible, but by no means do we have all the answers. This is very early in the process, so this is the next step here, is for us to then have this broader outreach to the community, talk through, get questions, try to hopefully maybe get some things that we hadn't thought of brought to the table, and then we'll continue to advance this through a series of other decisions that we'll talk through kind of at the end on the timeline. So that's the kind of the land use perspective that we're at right now, we think that it really does support maximizing flexibility, as well as having some significant cost savings to the cleanup, and really continuing to support our marine trades, which is really important on our from the port's perspective. So we can talk through in the Q&A some of the types of uses that we think would be work down there, but the really big take home is flexibility at this point. We don't have a tenant in mind. We don't have a very specific use in mind, but we think that this approach really adds flexibility that we could even continue to pursue a marina, maybe just a smaller marina in that area. So that's where we're at on the land use side of things. And I think that's the last slide on this one. We can go to the next goal. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so I think by now everybody's heard that we are still pretty early in the process, and so what I'm going to go through here is some habitat enhancement opportunities that we see for the project. And again, nothing's nailed down. This is just sort of trying to keep all the possibilities out there and see what'll stick as we move forward. I think it's worth pointing out that Port has a history of taking advantage of opportunities to do habitat enhancement. The Bellingham Bay Action Team that Brian described has that as part of its mission, is to leverage the cleanup projects like this, and then also to kind of work outside of some of the cleanup projects to bring habitat enhancements to the built environment around the bay. And to that end, as a log pond work was done in the past, there was eelgrass added, and just the fact of removing a lot of the material that had accumulated over the years, some contaminated and some just more artifacts of a working waterfront. It's a lot of stuff you can't see, and it creates a better, cleaner habitat inherently in these projects. The Squalacam Estuary, Squalacam Creek Estuary is another project that's occurred in the past that pulled a lot of stuff out of the environment and enhanced the estuary at the bottom of where the creek empties into the bay, and Marine Park, and we also have an upcoming project at Little Squalacam Beach. So next slide, please, to hone in more on this particular project. And so, one of the big things that you've heard, is really opening that 15 acres of the ASB will just create open water habitat that hasn't, been there since that treatment lagoon was built. And so where that can also be enhanced is by creating the benches that were shown in that rendering earlier, and that creates that shallow nearshore habitat that is lacking, where there's more typically more vertical structures around a working waterfront. And again, the details for that will have to be worked out as to when the depths are set and how big it ultimately winds up being. And the way I look at this is that by breaching the breakwater there, you do create that connectivity for migrating salmon, and there should be, with the benches, would also create an area of refugia for juvenile fish. Also inherent in these projects is a great deal of creosote removal and then reductions of overwater coverage. And that will extend into the waterway, and then there are some other areas considered out and around where the shipping terminal is. Let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so just back to this picture. This is from all the images I've seen, this is the one that I think is easiest for folks to get their head around the potential here. And again, nothing has been set as far as the dimensions of all this, but 15 acres of new marine water in itself is a pretty big improvement. And then, of course, all the associated removal of of the contaminated material from the water column, and then other material along the shoreline that's deleterious, like the creosote. And next slide, please. This is the last one. Oh, that was it. Okay, thank you. This is on to Greg Mchenry.
Thanks, Kurt. Last but not least, the goals have equal priority, is to support public access in coordination with our city partners. Next slide, please. The port and city have been working together to improve public access in the waterfront district for quite a while now. We all recognize up front here that this proposed realignment of the confined disposal facility will impact proposed parks identified in the sub-area plan already. Under the existing sub-area plan, adjustments to the size and shape of parks may be made over time, provided the overall park acreage within the waterfront district stays at 33. Just a little bit of background on the partnership. The port is dedicating or providing the lands for parks, and the city will be designing and managing the parks into the future. And that the parks and the public access will be compatible with adjacent uses is a very high priority. Of course, safety is our first priority. Examples of completed public access projects include the Waypoint Park and the beach restoration at Waypoint Park. We've got the interim BMX course over in the downtown waterfront area that's been highly successful. Some of the pipeline public access projects that are in the works are the Waypoint Park Extension Project and Cornwall Beach master plan efforts for the park at Cornwall Beach. Next slide, please. The interim Breakwater Trail will be preserved as a part of the Clean It project. The Breakwater Trail will be extended to the opening in the breakwater after the cleanup project. And any permanent public access amenities along the Breakwater Trail, such as viewpoints or benches, will be considered in a future City of Bellingham parks planning process. Next slide, please. Additional enhancements to improve public access and beach access for hand-carried vessels is the Pocket Beach near Hilton Harbor. That is anticipated. Also, the foot of the I&J waterway is also anticipated to be enhanced. And then I believe I will turn it over to Brian again for the timeline.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I think we're just getting close to wrapping up here. I think this is close to the last slide, so we're right on target here. So this is that, I kind of mentioned this earlier, that there's a number of moving parts here, and this is a timeline that is intentionally a lot going on here, and also there's kind of a range of things, both on the time frame here. So just one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at this is part of the purpose is to show, like, we've got a lot of coordinated steps to continue to work on it. This is really a very simplified version of that. So, we've got our ongoing on the top, kind of in blue, the blue box there, we've kind of got our ongoing land use planning. So we're going to continue getting feedback from engagement like this, working with the Port Commission, and having continued refinement of our different opportunities and constraints for the marine trades area. We do anticipate that if we start to go this way, that there is likely to have some coordination with the adjustments to the sub-area plan, partially what Greg was referring to there with the the park footprints and exact locations. Some work will have to be done on the marine trades area in general as we move that land use proposal forward. And that has its own separate timing and process that will be managed by the city, but it has engagement pieces on that and some formal steps as well. So that'll be ongoing as we advance this. On the cleanup side of things, what we do anticipate that we will be moving forward with a recommendation to the Port Commission that we move away from the large marina in the ASB to this revised expansion, or revised CDF and expansion of the marine trades. And depending on the Port Commission's direction on that, we can start amending our cleanup decisions along with the Department of Ecology. So there'll be a process that goes along with that. And we hope that later this fall, we will start that process of starting to amend the consent decree, starting working on the more detailed design elements and working on the permitting steps. We do anticipate that this will take some time for the permitting steps. And I think that the construction timeframe starting as early as 2024, that could even be optimistic. We don't know yet, but that's really what we're shooting for, that this could beginning construction as early as 2024. And it likely will take a few years. And that's just for the cleanup elements. The land use parts that come in behind that then would be potentially beyond that. And then the last piece that that's highlighted on the bottom there really is ongoing outreach. We really are trying to reach out to a variety of different stakeholders, the public in general, the marine trades industry, folks that have expressed interest in the waterfront district just over time, and really trying to keep people informed. We have ongoing updates to the Port Commission, and those are all public meetings with public comment available. We will be rolling this into our comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements, which is the port's land use type of document. There's a public process associated with that. And then, of course, the Department of Ecology has their own steps that they go through as well. So there's a lot of interlaced work here, but there will be very discrete and clear opportunities for formal engagement as well. So just wanted to show that this is got a lot going on here, and we really look forward to keeping it going and engaging with folks that are interested in it. So I think that was the last slide for me.
Thank you, Brian. We now have just a few minutes for some clarifying questions, and I saw a lot of great questions in the chat that we will bring up during the Q&A, so thank you for those. I did see one that read like a clarifying question, and I believe it's related to slide 11. Hillary, if you can go back to slide 11. Bree, would you like to unmute yourself and ask that question?
Yeah, hello. Are you talking about the question that I asked about the depth of the—
Yeah, I think it's shown in slide 11. Not this one, but the slide of the CDF. Oh, further forward. Sorry, Hillary, keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. Right here. Yeah, go ahead, Bree.
So I see that it's kind of on the right, it's saying 20, it's like elevation negative 25 feet, MLLW. What does that mean? Does that get at the depth of what the water is going to be?
That's the datum of the elevation shown. So that's the elevation is we're anticipating about 25 feet, negative 25 feet, mean lower low water. So for context, the
the current proposal for if we were to move forward with the CDF below the new marina, the elevation there would be about -14. So we're going about 10 feet, 11 feet deeper. And again, for some other context, the elevation of the breakwater, the trail around the breakwater is roughly 22 feet. So just for some context there, that's the elevations we're discussing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to jump in on really quick on that, that's exactly right. The -25, that's the depth of water there, and that's one where we did work with the marine trade stakeholder group to say, okay, what kind of depth would be helpful to facilitate your types of operations, and that was the depth that seemed about right for a variety of things. That wouldn't facilitate something like large container vessels or anything like that, but it could accommodate things like larger fishing vessels or some of the larger like NOAA research vessels, but wouldn't be part of our shipping terminal like a large container vessels or anything. But it was about the sweet spot of what we heard from the marine trades stakeholder group, but that's still yet to be determined, fine-tuned a little bit, but definitely deeper than the 14 feet, which is more for operations of a small marina, a small vessel marina. This could facilitate things like tugs and other marine trades type of uses.
Perfect. That answers my question completely. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other clarifying questions related to any of the slides in the presentation? And you can go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll invite you to unmute yourself and you can ask them. So I'll scan for any hands.
Melanie, I also, there's a question in the chat about the timeline and whether it indicates the time for public comment is drawing to a close.
Oh, well, let's pull up that last slide.
Yeah. And it looks like Brian will address that.
Yeah, thanks. So while you're pulling that slide up, no, yeah, thanks. That's a great question, and no, it doesn't indicate that the public comment period is coming to a close. Partially, I should have clarified this in the beginning. We're not in a formal comment period right now. This is really an opportunity for outreach, information exchange. When we get to the end here, we always take public input at a variety of different stages. We have an email that goes to me and Greg just at waterfront@portofbellingham.com. We kind of take comments all the time. We have an online form submittal on our port website that you can send comments in that comes to different folks at the port. So we're always taking things. This was just to highlight that there's multiple steps kind of all going on at the same time, and there will be discrete, very formal comment periods that will have start and close dates. We're not in one of those right now. We are just starting to engage with a broader audience, and we'll take thoughts and comments and questions. And we will be working towards some type of direction from the commission to give staff the direction to go continue working on this, but not necessarily a decision that is a formal agency approval or anything like that. And those will then come with very specific comment periods. So happy to take comments and input all the time. So hopefully that clarified that a little bit.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other hands up or questions in the chat. We're right at 7 o'clock, and so I'd love to honor our break. Before we go on break, I would like to continue encouraging people to put those questions in the chat. We've got a lot of great questions for the Q&A that's coming up already in there, which is excellent. I'd also like to ask if your first and last name is in your title on Zoom, then that's enough for me to work with. But if it's not, if you could put your first and last name and your email in there along with your question, and that's just to ensure if we do run out of time that we know how to contact you and we can follow up with you to make sure we get your questions answered. So go ahead and start putting those questions in the chat as we go on break. It is 7:01. If everyone could be back here by 7:05, that would be great. But go ahead and get some water and do whatever you need to do, and I will see you back here at 7:05. All right, it is 7:05. If folks could bring their video back on so that I know that people have returned. I'll give people a few minutes or a few seconds rather. All right, great. Well, I hope everyone had a wonderful break. Before we jump into the panel discussion, the Q&A, I'd like to invite a representative from the Working Waterfront Coalition. Pete, if you are on the call, I'd like to pass the mic over to you for a brief comment.
Thank you, Melanie. I'm Pete Granger, president of the Working Waterfront Coalition of Whatcom County. We represent 140 firms and organizations and individuals and fishermen involved in the maritime economy of Whatcom County, both in the Blaine Harbor areas and the Billingham waterfront areas. We work to enhance the economic vitality of that very, very important sector of our economy. And we support the port moving ahead with the plans for the cleanup and adaptive reuse of the former Aerated Stabilization Basin, the ASB, and the incorporation of the resulting uplands and new navigable waters into the designated marine trades area, with resulting facilities forming perhaps the nucleus for what I would call maritime supercluster, extending from the I&J waterway to the Whatcom waterway that will sustain existing maritime businesses and attract new ones over the long term. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete. Thanks for that comment and thank you for being here. We also have Gina Austin from City of Bellingham Parks on the call. I'd like to pass the mic over to Gina for a few words.
Hi, good evening. I'm Gina Austin, and I am a project engineer with the City of Bellingham. And we have been working with the port for years on this development and have been collaborating on parks in the area. And I'm here to I'll stick around to the end of the meeting too, if there are any questions related to parks. And as Brian mentioned, the parks in the waterfront are guided by, the development is guided by the Waterfront District Sub-Area Plan, which was updated in 2019. And that's on the city's website. And I think there's a link on the port's website as well, if you want to see the layout of the parks. And also, as Brian and Greg mentioned, there are some provisions for adjusting the size and the shape of the parks to really work with the overall waterfront and to get that total acreage, but just to make sure that the parks are balanced with use for industry and public access, habitat, all in a compatible way. And also to serve even these industrial areas, people that come to the waterfront to work or visit or vendors, they're also looking for respite and public access. And so all of that just comes together in these planning processes. But as each park is funded and is triggered by development, we do have public input and planning meetings and a lot of opportunity to discuss what goes in the parks. So we look forward to going through this process and continuing our collaboration with the port and the public.
Thank you so much, Gina, and thanks for being here. As we transition into the panel, I just wanted to briefly acknowledge Brian Gowron spoke about this a little bit earlier, but just the reality of the state that we're in and not being able to meet in person, obviously something like this would be much easier and more, lively and beneficial if we were able to meet in person. So, thank you for being here in this virtual space with us and for working with this system to make sure that we can discuss things as in-depth as possible, and taking these questions via the chat and things like that. So thank you so much for being here in this virtual space, especially in the evening. So you have already met our panelists, but just briefly, we'll be posing some of your questions to Brian Keenan, Brian Gowron, Kurt Baumgarten, and Greg Mchenry from the port. And thank you for all of the excellent questions. So these are, in no particular order, but I am going to kick off the first question to Brian Keenan. And just give me a moment so I can spotlight him for you. Okay, so Brian, areas 3A and 3B in the inner waterway, which is, if folks remember the map, it's close to Roeder Ave. These were capped in the phase 1 cleanup. If part of the ASB will be used as a confined disposal facility, is there any chance for these areas to be dredged in phase 2 of the cleanup?
Yeah, let's see. So the areas that are described there, those areas are completed in terms of the cleanup required. Now that's not to say that we can't look at that a little more closely. And as we mentioned earlier, we're early into the design process for the phase 2 cleanup. Those areas are really functioning pretty well. There's no sign of recontamination or erosion or new exposure of those areas left there. And so it's actually performing quite well, but it's not to say that we can't reevaluate that and consider that. It's a good question.
Thank you, Brian. And while I've got you, a second question for you. The new nearshore confined disposal facility proposal to create the 12 to 14 acres of upland seems to be the most economical approach for disposing of the contaminated sediments and will provide exciting maritime trade and working waterfront opportunities. However, this person is curious what the permitting implications will be for this proposal. Will there be mitigation requirements for filling in this aquatic area, or is the aerated stabilization basin not considered a regulated aquatic habitat since it's a contaminated site?
Yeah, another good question. The treatment lagoon is not considered aquatic waters. I guess that's my viewpoint on this. It was a treatment lagoon since early 80s, right? And the permitting process is still ahead of us, and that's something that we'll be looking through. Now, to answer the question whether or not mitigation will be required to open that half of that facility or former lagoon back up to the marine waters, that's something that we are considering and looking through, and that's really why we've already planning on committing some habitat enhancement elements as part of that, opening up half the former lagoon to the marine waters. So it is something. It's a good opportunity to implement some of the habitat enhancement elements into the work, and it seems like a good fit. But we really do have that permitting process ahead of us. But it is something that we've considered. Another good question.
Thank you, Brian. Hillary is closely monitoring the chat for other questions. Hillary, do we have any questions from the chat that we're ready to pose?
Yeah, there's quite a few coming in. First, there's a comment that I'm going to make first, and then I'll pose one of the questions. The comment is just thanking us for the opportunity to engage with the port directly on future projects. And just a kind of comment about, please consider a marine trade zone type area to include space for startup marine trades related business. And this is coming from somebody who's a former marine trade startup business owner. And that's just a comment. So I'll leave it there. And then a question has to do with the habitat component. So Kurt, I think this one is getting punted to you. And the question is, are the habitat benches the only habitat elements? Could you kind of expand on the habitat pieces? And the person apologized that they might have missed it because they had to step away from the presentation.
Yeah, and again, with being so early in the process, it's not clear if that's the only, those are the only opportunity. It's one of the larger opportunities. And given we don't know the exact size of that open water area, we don't know how big those benches would be. But my understanding is they could be envisioned to include, eelgrass plantings and basically create that shallow habitat that doesn't exist now. I think as the project moves forward, we'll look around the waterway and see if there's any other opportunities that can get rolled in. But until the land use pieces get nailed down, and that of course gets into the cleanup to see what else is there. It's I know it's going to be considered as we move forward, but the opportunities aren't there. I mean, given the environment, it's not, the opportunities aren't huge, but wherever they are, we'll go and try to figure out what we can do. And of course, just the other parts of it for this project are removal. If you look at like the wharf, the old GP wharf, large overwater structure, lots of creosote, and to the extent that comes out, that's another improvement. Removing any of the replacing the bulkhead that it could also be failing creosote. That's, while it's not a natural shoreline feature, it is creating far better conditions than exist today. So I mean, that's kind of where we're focused right now. But nothing's really off the table, and we'll continue to look at at this, since it is one of the main project elements. We'll be looking at it as we consider all the alternatives moving forward.
Thank you, Kurt. Melanie, I have one more question, and then I'll punt it back to you to do the pre-peppered questions. And it is just a question. I think this is probably most appropriate for Brian Gowron, of just how the local tribes, the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe, have been engaged in the process.
Yeah, that's always an excellent question. And I should have acknowledged from the beginning that this project, all of our projects, are in the traditional ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people, and we clearly are engaged in discussions with them. The Nooksack tribe and Lummi Nation are part of the Bellingham Bay Action Team, so they have been informed in this project as we've been briefing the BBAT. And then additionally, we do have a great working relationship with and it's we have a separate agreements on how we coordinate projects with the Lummi Nation, and we're working closely with them on that. We've engaged with the Nooksack tribe leadership on that as well. The actual detailed engagement on the project details kind of come and go through those discussions, but we are also always available to, and we've reached out a number of times to kind of to sit down and talk through those specifics. But there's lots of different ways that we are engaged very collaboratively and cooperatively in a really great working relationship right now. So then of course there is the federal permitting process, though. That's always kind of a different process that is a direct coordination step between the Army Corps of Engineers or a federal permitting agency, where they work with tribal treaty rights to make sure that those are addressed. So there's an engagement at that level as well through our permitting process. So multiple ways, and we truly are open to to those discussions whenever it's appropriate.
Thanks, Brian. I'll punt it back to you, Melanie. Melanie, I think you're on mute. I don't know. Okay, I think as Melanie's unmuting herself, I'll keep asking questions that I have coming out of the chat. So there's a question about, and I think Brian Gowron, you addressed this a little earlier. There's specifically what industries will go in, and I think the answer was it's kind of too early to know, correct? But marine trades sector. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we're looking at kind of trying to maximize flexibility at this point, but the marine trade sector, we really could be anything from boat building, boat yards, commercial fishing fleet, aquaculture, but really an expansion of kind of what we already see down in that marine trades area. Yeah. Great.
And also kind of well, not really a follow-up question to that, but I'm just asking about sort of post cleanup environmental protection measures that might be put in place for the industries that will be going in.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Anybody who's in the marine trades industry and specifically in boatyards knows then that there are strong regulatory requirements that have to be met for their activities. So one thing to kind of a two-part question. One is that with the cleanup action itself, there's protectiveness that works through the Department of Ecology for the cleanup decision. So like Brian Keenan had mentioned, by removing the shallow confined disposal facility really and pulling that up into out of the aquatic environment, provides another layer of certainty that that material is been removed from the aquatic environment. Then the capping and the containment of all that has to be done and designed appropriately. Then the operations that go on top of that. So there's stormwater requirements, industrial stormwater permits, stormwater treatment, that each individual industry has a tailored requirements that have to be met, and or general treatment that has to meet certain kind of benchmarks, and that's then monitored by the Department of Ecology. So we have a number of tenants that go through that, and we have at the port an environmental compliance assessment program that we help work with our tenants to ensure compliance with those additional requirements, also so that they're not creating a future cleanup site that we have to deal with 20 years down the road, right? So we've got a lot of mechanisms that we use, and the good news is that we've got a really great relationship with our tenants and the Department of Ecology on how we operate those and make sure that everybody's staying in compliance.
Great, thank you, Brian. I'm going to just again encourage people to please post your questions in the chat because we've got a little bit of time and you've got a great group of panelists here who can tackle them. I'm just going to keep going down my list. So this is sort of a follow-up question to the stormwater management that you just talked about, Brian. This question has to do, you mentioned that the individual companies would have their own stormwater plans, but this question is about whether there would be a more comprehensive stormwater plan so that the site doesn't get recontaminated. If you could speak, you or somebody else on the panel could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've talked about that. That's one of the opportunities we've looked at, is whether as that rendering showed, there's a lot of space there. This could be an area where we would, construct a site-wide regional stormwater management system that could serve all of those industries. That's something we've talked about at the staff level, and there's a lot of, you'd have to kind of know the details of it. So it depends on what industries are there. It could be something that would be great to prep the site and make it more marketable. So that's definitely something that we would, we've talked about. How exactly that would come together still to be determined, but that's definitely something that's on our radar. And it's been done in other places, even in Bellingham, with the regional stormwater facilities that really can help facilitate those types of things.
Great, thank you. Brian Gowan, you're kind of on the hot seat at the moment. I'm going to see if I can get, I'm also going to check and see what's going on with Melanie. She may have been booted out of the...
Here.
Oh, you're here.
So sorry.
It's okay.
I'm on my phone because technical issues are a new reality, and I have no idea what happened, but I'm making it work. Sorry about that. And this is why we have co-facilitator. Thank you, Hillary, so much. So I heard some of those questions, and I will pivot Brian from the hot seat, and I'll actually pose this question to Greg Mchenry. So Greg, the Marine Trades Area Cleanup and Redevelopment Project will support future improvements to shoreline access through new infrastructure and naturalized sloping shorelines. Have these naturalized sloping shoreline areas been identified? And if so, why haven't they been shown in figures?
Okay, well, generally, I believe they have been identified in the sub-area plan. And I would refer folks to, I believe it's figure 3.2, entitled Habitat Restoration Opportunities. And it also identifies areas where there might be natural shoreline enhancements as well. as far as why they're not shown here tonight and this evening is this was intended to be a higher level discussion. We don't have the project details on any of the design specifics for specific shoreline segments yet. So we didn't provide those. Hopefully that answers their question.
Thank you, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
I have another habitat related question, and I apologize. I'm not sure if this was addressed because I did also see it in the chat. So stop me if we've already discussed this. But what habitat restoration improvement opportunities are being considered for this specific area, being the marine trades area? And again, if there are other additional restoration improvement opportunities, why haven't they been shown on the most recent redevelopment area figures? And I guess I would pose this to you, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm not beyond what I've already gone over. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to add there. I mean, I'm also not exactly sure which figures, because I know there is the figure in the sub-area plan that Greg referred to. Those things are all still, on the table if they're viable, and we haven't gotten far enough down, the road on that. And I'm, Greg, Brian, are you guys able to shed any more light on that? I'm not.
Yeah, I think that was probably Melanie. I think that's probably one that was a repeat question that was when you dropped off. So I think we've kind of hit that one. Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah. Hey, Melanie, I've got a question that came in, and this question is for Gina,
Great.
which I think Gina's still on the call, correct?
I'm still here, yes.
Yay, Gina. Okay, this question is for you. And basically just a comment that there's been a lot of discussion about the cleanup and enhancement and the marine trades expansion, which was kind of by design, but this individual would like to hear a lot more about the parks and recreation and access piece of it. And could you speak a little more to that?
Oh, that's a big question.
It is.
If you want to email me, because there's the entire sub area plan, right? It's a multi-page document. There's an entire chapter devoted to parks and recreation, and all of the parks are laid out in that document. And if you need help navigating or finding that document, I can do that through you can email me or just call me at the Parks Department, the City of Bellingham. But in general, the parks are laid out kind of spatially in the plan, and just knowing that there can be some adjustments. It can't be rigid and then just not be compatible with connecting to trails or topography or other constraints. So those, all of that again is just it's laid out in that plan. And then as Brian and Greg showed on a couple of those slides, there still is the breakwater access, which is really quite phenomenal to be out there and to be just out over open water like that. So I'm not sure that totally answers the question. It's just that it's a big question about parks.
Yeah, and if I can jump in on that one just really quick as well, I think that's a perfect response. I mean, I think it goes to the theme of tonight is that we're early in the process on a lot of those things. I think we have highlighted, so there's definitely some really great locations in this area, in the marine trades area. Like Gina said, the Breakwater Trail is really fantastic. We do anticipate that there's opportunities to expand the kind of the experience out there, depending on how we do those habitat components, that there could be larger areas that are, more could spread out a little bit in that pocket beach at the kind of the corner of the ASB and the marine trades area. There's a great opportunity to expand around in there, especially if we have, 15 acres of property to work within. There could be some really cool ways to consolidate parks in and around those shoreline areas. So I think there's just a lot of good opportunities. It's just we're really early in that process, but we're definitely, that's why we've made sure that the city team is involved in all these as we move forward, so that we're all trying to pull those components together at the right time.
Right, and just to expand on that a little bit too, in these plans, you kind of just see green in like a two-dimensional space. And really, there's a lot more planning that's going to happen with public input, stakeholders deciding what goes in that space and how it connects and what the shapes and furnishings and everything that happens in that space is. It's just yet to come.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you, Brian. Melanie, I'll let you ask the next question.
Brian, I'll kick this off to you. It's a pretty specific question. Will there be a load-unload dock incorporated into the design of the ASB Marina, similar to the Sawtooth at Squalacam Harbor?
There could be. I mean, I think we don't know yet. That's one of the things we heard from that marine trade stakeholder group was an opportunity for even drive on, drive off kind of floats and facilities that could be for loading gear, a Sawtooth type of configuration, or whatever the most current version of that would be to facilitate this. We do anticipate that there is a vertical face at that confined disposal facility interface with the water. So you would have vertical opportunities for berthing vessels. There are going to be other structures that would have to be constructed around that depending on what the use is. And so that's something that's definitely on the list. It would depend on what the needs were. For example, if it was going to be a dry stack storage facility, we probably wouldn't need, in that location, need that type of facility. But if it was a commercial loading and unloading facility for fishing vessels or some other kind of facility like that, then we would build that into the design as well. So more to come.
Thank you. Another question for you, Brian. What are the anticipated maintenance costs associated with the marina in the ASB, such as maintaining breakwater and dredging? Has the port done a cost analysis on how much that will cost and how it will be paid for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that maintenance, of course, is always, that's a big part of any kind of infrastructure, especially marine infrastructure. That's not something we've built into this cost analysis right now. It's something that the port has to manage of all of our facilities across the board, from Blaine through Squalacam Harbor, our existing facilities, the Bellingham cruise terminal. It's a long-term planning and budgeting exercise depending on the specific need. What we do is a minimum of every 5 years, I think, a condition assessment of different structures, so we can see where they're at, plan proactively for budgeting and maintenance and repair that needs to happen on those. So there's always surprises that come up, but maintenance and repair and operations are always considered in our decision making. So this is a big one. There's no doubt about it, but it's starting off with a new facility. The construction of that, they usually has a lifespan, and Brian Keenan, you might be able to talk to this a little bit more from the engineering side of things, but that lifespan, usually gets built into the considerations when you're designing and constructing that facility.
Brian Keenan, is there any part of that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you got it right, Brian. So as we're walking through the different elements of what the proposed change in the cleanup is, those are elements that we are tracking, we're aware of, and are part of the analysis.
Hey, Brian Keenan, while you're up on the screen, Melanie, I'm going to pose the next question to Brian. And this has to do with the capping in the CDF. And the question has to do with, besides the capping as a protection measure for the contaminated sediments beneath it, will there be, what additional measures are being taken to address sea level rise and or kind of tsunami induced flooding or any kind of flooding?
Yeah, so that's another element that that was part of the earlier phase 1 cleanup analysis. right? So there was coastal modeling that went into the design of the caps, of the placed caps in the marine areas. So that is something that holds true as part of the phase 2 cleanup. And speaking directly to the ASB, or the confined disposal facility, that cap would be engineered, and the elevations considered. There's a lot of different things to balance there, but absolutely climate resilience is part of what we're looking at here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. This will be for Brian Gowron again. Can the port assure that the new ASB marina will be committed to use for marine trades and for working waterfront purposes, such as the commercial fishing fleet?
Yeah, a couple things on that one. I think that one of the slides that I mentioned earlier, kind of that fits within the kind of what's already established for the land use anticipated for the marine trades area in the waterfront district. I would say, just to be clear as well, we were talking about other things like public access and parks and habitat as well. But from a commercial usage, yes, I mean, this is what's anticipated, that it would be an expansion of the marine trades, kind of like we're already seeing down in that area right now. It could be everything from commercial fishing fleet to a barge terminal, or even shipbuilding, that type of thing. So that's what it is intended for. Of course, I need to caveat that the Port Commission can make decisions that however they want to lease or sell property. That's up to the Port Commission, as long as it's within the zoning uses that are allowed, that sort of thing. But there's no indication that we want to be going a different direction. We are, really supportive of the marine trades. We want to see that expanded in this area.
Great, thanks, Brian. I apologize again because I jumped out. Were you asked about stormwater already? Was that a question posed? Okay, great. I believe that is all I have from my pre-list. Hillary, are there any other questions in the chat that came in?
Yeah, there's one from Bree, and Bree, I'm calling you out because I may need you to help me with this question to make sure I understand it, but I'm going to do my best, and just feel free to pop in if I don't capture it accurately. And it's kind of a two-part question. The first part is, just an observation that COVID has basically created a pretty major increase in recreational boating, as I think most of us on the call know pretty well. And that it's difficult to find a boat slip in Bellingham for vessels over 35 feet. And apparently the average wait time for a vessel of that size to get a slip is about 5 years. And so I guess the question, and this is where I'm a little confused, Bree, is the question, is this new kind of reconfiguration of the CDF going to accommodate that? I think that's what Bree is asking here, or just thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just mainly wanted to know whether there would be slips, like, has it been decided whether there's going to be slips for boats over 35 feet or not?
Yeah, thanks for that one. That's so at this point, that's not a piece of what we're talking about right now, in the sense that at one point that whole kind of, as I said, the ASB was anticipated to be transitioned to the entire thing as a marina. It would likely have had a mixture of different slip sizes, but that marina design has not really ever progressed much. I think what would be more likely would be the scenario where some of the, and this is just kind of, again, we're just thinking about different ideas, definitely nothing concrete at this point, is that if there's opportunities for vessels that are currently moored in like commercial vessels that are in the Squalacam Harbor or that kind of thing, that they could potentially relocate over to the ASB, which would free up the ability for the marinas team to look at how to reconfigure the Squalacam Harbor, for example. Those are not decisions that have been made. I know that the port is very aware of the need for those types of slips, and there's a long waiting list for very specific sizes. So yeah, you're spot on there. I also agree that the COVID situation has definitely changed how we as a community deal with recreation and are outside more and are in spaces that are like, so the boating industry was changing 5-10 years ago and has changed back a fair amount, now with more and more activity on boats. But we are so aware of that and tracking all that as far as the decisions of the land use go. Great.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Bree, for that question. I had one last question, but Ken Bell already answered it, but I think I'll just address it and provide Ken's answer so everybody can benefit from it. The question was the port's intention with the 15-acre upland portion, whether they were going to maintain ownership and lease it and management of it or sell it. And Ken responded, it is the current commission direction that the port would own the property, not sell. The port will maintain and manage the site. So with that, Melanie, I think we're done with queuing up questions. Panelists, are there any other final thoughts or things that have come to mind as you listen to these questions tonight?
I did want to have one just follow up. I did see a question that came in that was a clarification on one of the early comments about the areas at the head of the waterway, and we had stated that those had been capped. And the comment was that those were not capped. And I did need to go back and double check. And I appreciate this is great when we can do this in real time a little bit. And I would agree that was not that. I was confused on those areas. Those are areas that were part of they were part of the phase 1 work. And George, thank you for your clarification on that. They were part of the phase 1 work that was part of the ecology approved cleanup. That particular area was actually part of the natural recovery area, which is kind of natural capping. So just didn't want to have the confusion that one area was engineered capped and then one area was natural recovery. So all the work that Brian mentioned as far as the ongoing performance of that still holds true. But just wanted to clarify that comment that was in response was accurate, and that our kind of statement of it being capped was not. You could use a little clarification.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Any other final comments from any of our other panelists? Okay. Well, thank you all for such great and thoughtful questions. We really, really appreciate everyone's engagement. It's clear that everyone is very interested, and your willingness to participate in this process is hugely appreciated. So thank you so much. There are a few things that we're going to post in the chat for everyone's benefit. One is the link to our website, and that is where you can find the most up-to-date information. A lot of the documents that were referenced tonight can be accessed there. It's also where we will eventually post this recording. So do bookmark that, and check it out for future updates. We'll also send the link to the video that we shared tonight. And as we mentioned before, please share that out and encourage people to learn more about the project and find out ways that they continue to stay engaged. And then the last is an email address that Brian Gowron mentioned earlier that goes right to his inbox, where you can follow up with questions as you're, as you hop off this call and you think, oh shoot, that was the question I wanted to answer. Well, feel free to shoot it to that email address. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brian Gowron to do a final sign off.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. Yeah, just to reiterate, I mean, we said it a bunch already, but we really do appreciate everybody's time, everybody's input. We are here to help. We try at the port really do try to be transparent. There's a lot of things. It's easy to put your head down and try to get work done, and it's great to look up every once in a while and get folks' input and take comments and really engage on these. And then we do look forward to this. I kind of, like we said in the video, I personally see the Waterfront District and this project as kind of community transformational type of project, and it's going to take a long time. It's already taken a long time, but we are really dedicated to working on this, and we think we got a really great project that has multiple benefits to it and provides a lot of flexibility on our land use, and really is a great project. So please like I said, send me those notes, and then saw Gina posted her email as well. So we really do work really collaboratively with our partners and look forward to more and more engagement on this. So yeah, just thanks to everybody.
Thanks all. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye.